Hello, everybody. My name is Randy Shore, and today I'm going to show you a little bit about how you would write a custom savings opportunity check using Kion's compliance engine. So first, to begin, let's look at the savings opportunities that come out of the box here. So I can see that here within my system settings and going into savings opportunities. And within here, I can see that I have a whole bunch of different checks across AWS, across Azure, across rightsizing and decommissioning. We've had requests to be able to customize some of these, and I'm going to show you today how you can actually write your own policies to report on essentially any metrics that you might be interested in. So you can absolutely start from scratch on these things, but I also want to show you how you might be able to get some of the definitions that exist back here from our database to then pull and modify and make on your own. So as usual, you'll connect to your Kion instance, connect into the database, and all of our definitions, as you'll notice, are these cloud custodian policies. So same thing that's running our compliance engine, but essentially, right, to pull these, it's as simple as just a simple query, right? So if you have your exact policy name that you want, you can query this and filter this a bit more. But ultimately, what we're going to be doing from the database called Cloud Tamer is selecting the name and the policy body from a table called cost savings definition. So this is giving me everything that I have here. You'll notice it first gives me the name and then follows that with the actual policy that I need myself here. So again, if you wanted to filter it, you would do select name policy from cost savings definition, where name equals, and you would put in the exact name from here, right? So if I wanted to see EC2 instances with an average CPU utilization of 10% or less, what that would actually look like in the database, excuse me, there we go, would be let me just do this and get my little picture out of the way here. Perfect. So we could just do a select name policy from cost savings definition, where name equals, boom, semicolon, submit that. And now here is the actual policy that we're using to drive this particular EC2 instances with average CPU utilization of 10% or less here. Okay. So what you can then do is you want to make sure you copy these three dashes here, copy this all the way through the closing bracket, and open Sublime Text or sorry, any of your text editor here. So here's an example where I have my EC2 max CPU utilization. And so we've had a request to maybe change this from average CPU utilization, which is what we're using. But let's actually just walk through this policy, right? So we are targeting EC2. Here we have EC2 instances that are over 7 days old, where CPU utilization is 10% or less. We're removing out some of the nano instances here since you can't really downsize from that. And we're also removing out some of the GPU-based instances since what we're looking at in this definition is CPU. So here we're looking, making sure that it's been running. From that, we're making sure of this particular age. So we want an instance that's over 7 days old. So we're looking at greater than or equal to 7 days for the instance age. And the metric that we're looking at here is our CPU utilization. We're pulling an average across the 7 days and finding where utilization is 10% or less, right? Less than or equal to, and then making sure that the instance type is not in here. And so that's our policy definition. And now we can begin to look at how we might modify that. So first and foremost, again, we're using Cloud Custodian. So looking at something like the C7N filters metrics, right? What are we actually looking at and how is this all supported? So in this case, we can actually use the documentation to find, in this case, what metrics are supported via CloudWatch, which takes me into this, right? And actually before this, it actually takes me into all of the different services that CloudWatch is enabled for. So this is all of these things can be used to write these policies against. And then ultimately within EC2, that's where we're monitoring our instances and getting the statistics, which are all of these, right? So here's our minimum, maximum, sum, or average. You notice in that policy we were using our average. We can use any of these things. And then these are the different metrics that we can base ourselves on. So again, today we're doing it on CPU utilization. If you want to find EC2 instances that, you have a certain amount of networks or credits or any of the things that are in here, right? Those can all be written into those definitions because that's ultimately what is getting queried. And so in our case, we're looking at CPU utilization. And if we come back to the documentation that I was in, you'll notice that in this case, this is looking for underutilized CPU in this example, but you'll notice that we have a number of different things in the schema here. And so what we're looking at are the statistics, and then these are the values that you can use. So average, sum, maximum, minimum, right? So in our case, what we want to say is, let's say we want to build one where we don't have EC2 instances that are more than 7 days old, where utilization has not peaked above, let's say 70% is what we're going to change this to. So let's say 70% or less. And what we're going to do here is just change this, again, using this value of maximum to be maximum here. And now what is our value? 70 days or 70% over the last 7 days. And this policy is saved and ready to go, right? So from here, we can take this policy. We can modify this stuff if we want to change out the body to actually fit for compliance. So to do that, what we would essentially do is look at a compliance check inside of Kion. So I'm just going to pull up this and look at, say, any EC2 based check, because I think that will give us what we need. Come into our policy down here and see what we're passing into the body. So this is actually what we're going to want. It's a little bit different than the policy action that is in a savings opportunity, since we don't have definition IDs in compliance here. And what we can basically do is just copy out this whole action section, throw that in here, and basically what this is going to come back and do is tell us the account ID where we found this, the region that this instance is running, the instance ID, and that it's an EC2 instance that is causing this, right? So that's the last bit of what I need. And now this is actually Kion ready. So I can come in here, I can add it as a new compliance check if I want to go out there and start scanning. Or if I want to play around and test this a little bit, one of the things I like to do is use Cloud Custodian locally on my machine. There's a getting started guide. If you just type in Cloud Custodian install, there's a getting started guide. It will install, Python to actually run locally. And then what we can actually do is we can give credentials to test this in an account. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab the first one that I have short-term keys for. That's this guy here. So grab those keys and go ahead and get those posted inside of my terminal here. So let me escape that. Basically going to do that. And now I've got access keys into an AWS account. So Custodian has an option called dry run. And so that's just what I want to do. It's just going to go out there and basically look for anything that might be utilizing this, that would actually go out and find anything, right? So if I were to say run this locally now, it's going to target the account where I have keys to. Forgot to set my region, so I can either do that this way or set my default region as it's asking there. And now here I've got one resource where I've basically identified based upon my filters here. So in this case, I have an instance that's been running for more than a week where the maximum CPU utilization has not peaked over 70%, right? To show the same thing, if I were to change that to greater than or equal to, resave the policy and run this again, the instance that I've had has never actually peaked above that. And so therefore we see that now the inverse is not true. So that shows me that this is a valid policy. All is good. And then what I can do is come back to Kion and upload this as my own compliance check. And so what I would do is something like this, right? I'd make a new compliance check and call this EC2 instances CPU utilization below, say, 70%. This is looking for EC2 instances that have not peaked over the last week at 70% or greater CPU. For me, I'm going to make these all informational so that I'm aware of them, but they're not counting toward my compliance score. Here's where you can set your check owners. This is a cloud custodian check, and we're just going to paste that policy body in here. Right, it's everything I just had. Validate it. It looks good. And then how often do I want this to run? Do I want this to run every day, every hour, every minute? I'm just going to say apply one day, and then my regions are going to be set for me automatically. So I can go ahead and create that compliance check. So now this is in there. It hasn't been run yet. It's still inactive. And then you can apply this to existing standards or new standards. So if I were to make a new standard called Kion custom savings opportunities, this is ultimately where I'm going to group my checks together. So in this case, I want EC2 instances, CP utilization below 70%, create that compliance standard. And now I just define what projects I actually want to deploy this to, or OUs I want to deploy this to by creating a cloud rule, right? So everything in Kion gets deployed via cloud rule. So I'm going to go and say savings opportunity custom checks. Apply the compliance standard that I just came up with for custom savings opportunities. Or again, add this to maybe an existing cloud rule that's already out there in my environment, create that cloud rule, and now I can go into, say, a given project and actually run or attach the cloud rule. So I'm going to add an existing one here that I just created, savings opportunity custom checks, confirm that. And what that's going to do now is tell Kion to go out and actually deploy those compliance checks and start looking for those opportunities to come back. And so ultimately, what that's going to do is, let me find the standard that I just made. So I have 0 active, 0 suppressed findings at the moment because they have just gone out. But ultimately, this check is now set up to run. It's not yet scanned. It's only going to scan on 3 accounts because that's where I scoped that cloud rule to. And when these come back with a finding, that will ultimately be opportunities that met that particular criteria that I could save money on. So hope that helps answer just some of the ways in which you can write Kion's custom compliance checks for savings opportunities and not just compliance. If you have any questions, as always, please feel free to reach out to Kion support at support.kion.io or support@kion.io email address. Thank you.